They killed Big Bertha. That 8-pound bass came to my dock every morning for 3 years. I named her, fed her, watched her grow. Now she's floating belly up with 200 other fish because my HOA president thinks she owns my lake. The chemical stench burned my nostrils at sunrise sharp copper sulfate mixed with rotting scales. Vivian Blackwater had dumped $3,500 of industrial algaecide into my crystal clear water overnight, turning it the color of antifreeze. I stood there holding Bertha's slimy, lifeless body shaking with pure rage. Then I realized something absolutely beautiful. Vivian's fancy subdivision gets their drinking water from the same underground spring that feeds my lake. Every drop, every house, 847 homes. She didn't just poison my fish, she poisoned her entire neighborhood, and she has no clue what's about to hit her. Ever had neighbors who thought they could destroy your property just because they didn't like what you were doing? Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've got an HOA nightmare story, drop it below because this one's about to get wild. My name's Marcus Reed, and at 52, I never thought I'd be at war with a woman who probably spends more on her manicures than I make in a week. But that's suburbia for you. I'm a retired electrician turned solar panel installer here in Pine Ridge, North Carolina. The kind of guy who fixes things with his hands and believes people should mind their own damn business. My 12-acre property with its spring-fed lake has been in my family since 1952, back when this whole area was tobacco fields and common sense. Every morning, I walk that gravel path my grandfather laid boots, crunching on stones worn smooth by decades of fishermen. The dock planks feel warm and weathered under my hands, still sticky with morning dew, and that sweet honeysuckle smell mixes with the clean mineral scent of spring water. Blue herons nest in the cypress trees, bass jump at dawn, and for 70 years, this place has been pure peace. Then the developers showed up. 15 years ago, they bought everything around me and built Willow Creek Estates, 847 McMansions starting at $600,000 each. They offered me millions to sell, wanted my lake for their country club. I told them they could take their money and build a clubhouse in hell. Most of the new neighbors were fine, normal people who waved when they jogged past, maybe asked about the fishing. But then Vivian Blackwater moved in. Picture this, 47 years old, drives a white Lexus that's detailed more often than most people shower, and carries a leather portfolio to neighborhood barbecues. She talks like a lawyer even when ordering coffee, throws around phrases like property value optimization and aesthetic compliance standards. The kind of person who probably schedules her bathroom breaks. Vivian appointed herself HOA president within 6 months and immediately launched her enhancement campaigns, which is fancy talk for making everyone miserable until they bow to her suburban dictatorship. Her opening shot came 3 months after she moved in. Certified mail, official letterhead, the whole production. My unsightly fishing activities were apparently disturbing her peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. $800,000 she paid for that lakefront view, and watching me catch dinner was somehow ruining her investment. The legal threats escalated fast. She claimed my dock violated aesthetic covenants that were supposed to apply to all area properties. The woman actually had the nerve to demand I tear down a structure that's been here since before she was born. I called my buddy Tom Martinez, real estate lawyer, who saved my ass more than once. He nearly choked on his coffee, laughing. Marcus, property that predates HOA establishment cannot be subject to retroactive covenants. She's threatening you with laws that don't exist. Knowledge nugget. If your property existed before an HOA was formed, their rules generally can't be applied to your land retroactively. Your deed date is your legal shield. When intimidation failed, Vivian filed a false complaint with the county about my illegal dock structure. Poor inspector drove out here, looked at my 1987 permits, and apologized for wasting his time. You could practically see him rolling his eyes. That's when she revealed her true nature. Every morning I'd head down to fish 6 a.m. when the bass are feeding, and suddenly Vivian needed emergency landscaping. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, industrial mowers, all screaming at maximum volume right along her property line. The diesel fumes would drift across my lake, mixing with honeysuckle and turning my peaceful morning into something that smelled like a highway construction zone. Her crew got more overtime in 2 months than most people see all year, all to spite one guy trying to fish in his own backyard. But I kept fishing. Some principles are worth defending, even against suburban tyrants with too much money and too little sense. I had no idea that Vivian was just getting warmed up. And I definitely didn't know she was crazy enough to commit environmental terrorism to get her way. You know what's worse than a Karen with a law degree? A Karen with a law degree who thinks property surveys are weapons of mass destruction. 2 weeks after the county inspector laughed at her illegal dock complaint, Vivian hired the most expensive surveyor in 3 counties to verify our property boundaries. Not because there was any question, my grandfather marked those lines with concrete posts that'll probably outlast civilization itself. This was pure harassment with a professional invoice. The surveyor showed up Tuesday morning with equipment worth more than my truck. Theodolites, GPS units, laser levels that probably cost more per hour than most people make in a day. I watched from my kitchen window, sipping coffee and enjoying the show as they spent 6 hours measuring the exact same boundary that's been legally established since Truman was president. The smell of fresh-cut grass from their fancy equipment mixed with morning lake mist. Even their harassment had to be perfectly manicured. 3 days later, Vivian's lawyer sent me a registered letter claiming my dock extended exactly 6 inches onto community water rights. 6 whole inches. On a lake that's been in my family since before she was born. But here's where Vivian really showed her true colors. She filed an actual lawsuit in county court for property encroachment. Professional letterhead, court stamps, filing fees that probably cost more than most people's car payments. All over 6 inches of dock space. When this woman commits to ruining someone's life, she doesn't mess around. While her legal papers crawled through the system, she launched a Facebook campaign that would make a political operative jealous. Posted in the Willow Creek Estates group about her difficult neighbor who was refusing to respect community standards. The comments section turned into a digital lynch mob faster than you could say property values. But 2 can play the research game. I spent my weekend in the county courthouse basement, breathing dust that was probably older than Vivian's entire career, digging through deed records and property transfers. Sometimes the best revenge is just knowing more than your enemy. And holy hell, did I hit the jackpot. My grandfather didn't just own the land, he owned exclusive water rights to the entire lake system. Every drop, every fish, every damn molecule of H2O. The original 1952 deed specifically included all water rights, surface and subsurface, including natural springs and tributaries thereto. But here's the beautiful part that made me laugh so hard I nearly fell off my chair. The lake is spring-fed from an underground aquifer that extends directly under Vivian's precious subdivision. Legally speaking, every time her neighbors flush their toilets, they're using my water. Knowledge nugget. Water rights often transfer separately from land ownership and are recorded in property deeds. These rights can be worth more than the land itself. I called Tom Martinez with my discovery. After he stopped cackling like a madman, he said, "Marcus, you don't just have a defense. You've got a nuclear weapon disguised as a property deed." So we filed a countersuit for harassment, slander, and abusive legal process. But the timing? That was pure poetry. Vivian was hosting one of her fancy backyard dinner parties. 40-plus HOA residents standing around with wine glasses, complaining about their property taxes while eating food that cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. The evening air carried the scent of expensive catered salmon and pretentious conversation. Champagne glasses caught the golden hour light, everyone dressed like they were auditioning for a real estate commercial. Right in the middle of Vivian's speech about maintaining community standards and property values, our sheriff's deputy walked through her back gate like he owned the place. "Ma'am, I need to serve you with some legal documents." 40 conversations stopped mid-sentence. The only sound was ice clinking nervously in glasses as Vivian's perfectly manicured hands trembled reading the papers. Her foundation couldn't hide how pale she went when she realized what she was holding. "This is harassment," she shrieked loud enough to rattle windows. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me with frivolous lawsuits." And there it was. The mask slipped completely. The refined real estate attorney became just another suburban tyrant having a nuclear meltdown because someone dared fight back. Her dinner guests suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Amazing how fast rich people can evacuate when someone starts screaming about rednecks at a catered party. But Vivian wasn't done. The next morning, I found an anonymous note under my windshield wiper. "Stop fishing or face the consequences." Apparently, public humiliation just made her more dangerous. Anonymous threats are cute, but what Vivian did next was straight-up government weaponization. There's nothing quite like watching a real estate attorney turn federal agencies into her personal attack dogs. Within a week of my countersuit, I had more government inspectors crawling over my property than a meth lab bust. Fish and Wildlife showed up first, clipboards in hand, claiming they needed to investigate potential disruption to migratory bird patterns caused by my fishing activities. I'm not making this up. This woman actually convinced a federal agency that me catching bass was somehow screwing with duck GPS systems. The EPA inspector arrived next, suited up like he was entering Chernobyl, armed with water testing kits and a clipboard thicker than Vivian's legal bills. Apparently, my private lake usage might be creating environmental hazards. The sweet irony of that accusation would hit me like a freight train later. County Health Department Thursday morning, Code Enforcement Friday afternoon. By week's end, I had more regulatory business cards than a Washington lobbyist. Each inspector found exactly what you'd expect from the cleanest lake in 3 counties. Absolutely nothing wrong. But bureaucratic harassment is a two-way street, and I was about to learn how to drive it. While Vivian was playing puppet master with government agencies, I was making friends with the puppets. Turns out, when you're polite to overworked civil servants forced to investigate obviously bullshit complaints, they remember you. They also remember who's wasting their time. Dolores Martinez became my secret weapon. 68-year-old retired county clerk with a memory like a steel trap and a grudge against corrupt developers. Over coffee that tasted like justice and caffeine, she dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. Marcus, that whole subdivision was built on protected wetlands. Developer got his permits by promising to preserve all natural water features forever. It's federal law. The coffee cup felt warm in my hands as the implications sank in. Knowledge nugget. Development permits often contain perpetual preservation clauses that legally bind all future property owners. Violating these environmental restrictions can trigger massive federal penalties. I spent the next weekend playing environmental detective, and what I discovered was better than winning the lottery. Vivian's landscaping contractor, the same diesel-belching crew that had been serenading my fishing trips, was using my lake as their personal garbage dump. Grass clippings, hedge trimmings, fertilizer-soaked debris, all of it flowing directly into federally protected wetlands. Every Saturday morning at dawn, like clockwork, I became an environmental paparazzi, hiding in the tree line with my camera while the sweet smell of honeysuckle mixed with diesel exhaust. The rough bark of oak trees pressed against my back as I waited for the perfect shot. 3rd Saturday in a row, I caught them dumping organic waste straight into my water, the splash echoing across the still morning air. The photos were gorgeous, time-stamped, GPS-located, high-resolution evidence of federal crimes happening in broad daylight. But the real jackpot came when I ran their license through the state database. Pristine Landscaping, LLC, was 40% owned by Richard Blackwater, Vivian's husband, real estate developer and apparently part-time environmental criminal. The EPA doesn't just love environmental violations with photo evidence, they absolutely worship them when they're connected to harassment campaigns. I filed my complaint Monday morning with a smile that could have powered half the county. By Wednesday, Pristine Landscaping was under federal investigation. Richard lost 3 county contracts by Friday. Turns out, when you're dumping organic waste in protected wetlands, municipalities suddenly don't want you maintaining their public parks. Who could have seen that coming? The sound of Vivian's perfectly controlled world starting to crack was sweeter than church bells on Sunday morning. But if I thought environmental violations would humble her, I was about to learn just how spectacularly wrong one person can be. Nothing makes a desperate woman more dangerous than watching her husband's business empire crumble because of her personal vendetta. And Vivian Blackwater was about to prove she'd rather burn down the neighborhood than admit defeat. The morning I found the Algae-Side Company's business card tucked under my windshield wiper, I knew we'd crossed the line from legal warfare into something much darker. The card smelled faintly of chlorine and desperation. Environmental terrorism was apparently Vivian's next play. Too bad she didn't realize she was about to poison her own drinking water. That business card under my windshield wasn't just a threat. It was a confession waiting to happen. But I had no idea Vivian was about to commit the kind of environmental crime that would make hardened EPA agents weep. While I was out of town visiting Sandra's sister in Charlotte, Vivian was busy researching algae management solutions, like she was preparing for environmental warfare. She found Clearwater Solutions, a commercial algae-side company that specializes in industrial-strength pond treatments. The kind of chemicals that can sterilize a lake faster than you can say property values. Here's where Vivian's lawyer brain really shined. She called Clearwater and lied through her perfectly veneered teeth, claiming my lake was community property, experiencing a dangerous algae bloom that threatened public health. $3,500 in cash paid up front for a midnight chemical assault on what she told them was an emergency environmental situation. The irony would have been hilarious if it wasn't about to murder everything I loved. I came home Sunday evening to the smell hitting me before I even stepped out of my truck. That sharp, metallic stench of copper sulfate mixed with mass death. The lake water had turned an unnatural blue-green color, like antifreeze mixed with apocalypse. Big Bertha was floating 20 feet from the dock, her massive body already bloated in the contaminated water. 3 years of morning feedings, watching her grow from decent-sized bass into a lake legend, and now she was just another casualty in Vivian's suburban genocide. 200 other fish floated alongside her bluegill, crappie, catfish. An entire ecosystem assassinated overnight because one woman couldn't stand watching someone enjoy their own damn property. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone, the smooth plastic slippery with sweat and pure rage. The county environmental emergency hotline connected me to Officer Jim Patterson, who'd been investigating illegal dumping for 15 years. When I described the aquatic crime scene, his voice shifted from routine bureaucrat to DEFCON 1. Don't touch anything, keep pets away, and don't disturb the evidence. I'm bringing the hazmat team. Patterson arrived with water analysis equipment that looked like it belonged on Mars. The test strips turned colors that don't exist in nature, deep blues and purples screaming, massive chemical contamination. The acrid smell of testing chemicals mixed with lake death made my eyes water. Industrial-strength copper sulfate poisoning, he said, his voice tight with professional fury. Whoever did this didn't just kill your fish. They sterilized the entire ecosystem for 2 to 3 years minimum. This is felony destruction of property, possibly federal environmental terrorism. Knowledge nugget. Illegal dumping of industrial chemicals on private property constitutes felony destruction in most states and triggers federal environmental crime charges carrying 5 to 10-year prison sentences. But Patterson wasn't done playing detective. While I stood there holding a garbage bag that used to be my fishing paradise, he was reviewing security footage from Mrs. Henderson's doorbell camera across the street. The video was crystal clear. Clearwater Solutions truck arriving at 2:17 a.m., 2 figures in protective suits dumping death directly into my lake, vanishing by 2:43 a.m., 26 minutes to destroy 70 years of family heritage. That evening, I sat on my dock holding one of the smaller dead bass, remembering my grandfather teaching me to cast in this exact spot. The wooden planks felt cold and splintered under my legs, and the silence was absolutely deafening. No birds, no insects, no life around water that used to bubble with activity. Sandra found me there an hour later, both of us crying as we started the nightmare cleanup of environmental terrorism. But grief sharpens focus like nothing else. As we filled garbage bag after garbage bag with Vivian's victims, my electrician brain started connecting dots. I'd installed solar panels on dozens of houses in this subdivision. I knew their utility systems intimately. Every house in Willow Creek Estates uses well water pumped from the same underground spring system that feeds my lake, the same aquifer, the same water source, the same copper sulfate contamination now flowing through limestone channels toward 847 unsuspecting homes. I had my water tested the next morning by an independent lab. The results made my blood run cold. Copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than EPA-safe drinking water standards. Vivian hadn't just poisoned my lake. She'd contaminated her entire neighborhood's water supply. Every faucet, every shower, every ice cube maker in that pristine subdivision was now serving up industrial toxins. The woman who spent months bitching about my unsightly fishing activities had just turned her perfect community into a toxic waste site, and she was about to drink her own poison. Sweet, sweet karma never tasted so metallic. You know that moment when you're researching one thing and accidentally discover nuclear codes hidden in your grandmother's recipe box? That's basically what happened when I decided to dig deeper into my grandfather's property records. I thought I was building a stronger legal defense against Vivian's bullshit lawsuit. What I found instead was the equivalent of owning the only water well in a desert full of thirsty people. Monday morning, I drove back to the county courthouse basement, that special kind of government purgatory that smells like old paper, dust mites, and crushed dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps while I dug through file boxes that hadn't been touched since people thought Y2K would end civilization. The original deed transfer from 1952 was buried under decades of irrelevant paperwork. My fingers were black with archival dust when I finally found it, written in that formal legal language designed to make normal humans fall asleep. Then I hit the paragraph that made my heart stop. Including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity. In perpetuity. Latin for forever and ever, suck it. My grandfather hadn't just bought land. He'd bought every drop of water flowing through the underground spring system, extending for miles beneath what would eventually become Vivian's precious subdivision. I sat there in that dusty basement, hands trembling, holding a 70-year-old document that just made me the most powerful person in 3 counties. The paper felt thin and fragile, but the words on it were stronger than titanium. Here's where it gets absolutely delicious. I pulled the Willow Creek Estates development records from 2008. The developer's water usage permit application claimed they'd be drilling independent wells with sustainable water sources. Independent wells that tap directly into my grandfather's spring system 400 feet downstream from my lake. Every single one of them. The developer never purchased water rights because he probably didn't even know they existed as a separate asset. Most people don't. They think owning land means owning whatever water's underneath it. Wrong. Expensive assumption. Career-ending mistake. Knowledge nugget. Water rights are completely separate from land ownership and must be explicitly transferred. Failure to secure these rights can expose developers and homeowners to massive legal liability and usage fees. For 15 years, 847 families had been using my water without permission, without compensation, and without even knowing their most hated neighbor literally owned every drop flowing from their taps. The math alone made my head spin. Average household water usage times 847 homes times 15 years times market rate for water rights. We're talking tens of millions of dollars in back payments I could legally demand. But the contamination angle? That was the diamond sitting on top of this legal gold mine. Every home in that subdivision was now drinking water poisoned by Vivian's midnight chemical warfare. Copper sulfate symptoms include stomach pain, nausea, liver damage, and in children, developmental problems. The EPA treats this as a public health emergency worthy of federal intervention. Vivian's lawsuit against me for 6 inches of dock space suddenly looked like a toddler threatening Mike Tyson. I called Tom Martinez from the parking lot, sunshine warming the truck's interior while my world tilted on its axis. Tom, I don't just own the lake. I own their entire water supply. Every drop they've used for 15 years is legally mine. The silence stretched so long I checked if my phone had died. Marcus, he finally whispered, you're not defending against a property dispute anymore. You're sitting on the biggest water rights case this state has ever seen. And if that contamination spreads through the aquifer... He didn't finish. We both knew. Vivian had poisoned 847 homes using water that belonged to me. The power dynamic just shifted so hard I could feel the earth move under Vivian's designer heels. When you discover you're sitting on a legal nuclear weapon, you don't just start swinging it around like a drunk guy at a bar fight. You assemble a team of highly trained assassins who know exactly where to aim. First call went to Rebecca Torres, environmental lawyer out of Raleigh who'd built her career destroying corporations that thought poisoning communities was just good business. Her office smelled like expensive espresso and vendetta when I walked in Tuesday morning. Water rights violation, environmental contamination, public health emergency, she said, eyes gleaming as she reviewed my documents. Marcus, this isn't a lawsuit. This is a masterclass in legal warfare that'll be taught in law schools for decades. Rebecca's strategy was beautiful. Hit them from every direction simultaneously before they even know they're under attack. Federal lawsuit for water rights theft. EPA emergency intervention for contamination. State criminal charges for illegal dumping. Civil suits for property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages that would make a lottery winner blush. Legal tactic. Overwhelming opponents with simultaneous legal actions from multiple jurisdictions forces immediate defensive positions. They'll be too busy putting out fires to mount any coordinated counterattack. Second recruit was Dr. James Mitchell, hydrogeologist from North Carolina State, who makes opposing lawyers weep during depositions. We met at my poisoned lake Wednesday morning, where he spent 4 hours taking samples and mapping the underground spring system with equipment that probably cost more than my truck. Fascinating aquifer structure, he said, knee-deep in contaminated water that still reeked of chemicals. His hands moved precisely through testing procedures while dragonflies that used to swarm here were notably absent. Single-source spring feeding directly into residential wells. Contamination will reach every home within 6 to 8 weeks. We're looking at 800 to 1,000 affected properties. The scientific hammer that would crush any doubt about Vivian's guilt. Third team member was Sarah Morgan, investigative journalist who'd spent 3 years taking down corrupt HOAs like she was collecting scalps. Her exposés had destroyed 2 HOA presidents for embezzlement, and one who was literally running a protection racket. When she saw my evidence, she looked like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is Pulitzer-level material," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table with reverent excitement. Power-drunk HOA tyrant poisons entire neighborhood while terrorizing the guy who legally owns their water supply. CNN will fight MSNBC for first interview rights. Sarah's background check on Vivian read like a serial killer's resume. 3 previous neighborhoods, 4 harassment lawsuits, 2 restraining orders for stalking behavior. The woman had a documented 20-year pattern of destroying anyone who dared challenge her authority. Dolores Martinez provided the historical ammunition. Over dinner coffee that tasted like justice and bottomless refills, she showed me permit applications proving the original developer had committed outright fraud claiming water rights he never purchased, never owned, never even verified, existed. Every homeowner bought property under false pretenses, Dolores explained, her weathered fingers tapping yellow documents. They think they own water access. Legally, they've been stealing from you for 15 years. Rebecca crunched numbers with calculator precision. Market rate for water rights in our county, $50 per household monthly, times 847 homes, times 180 months, $30.6 million in back payments I could legally demand. That's before calculating punitive damages for the contamination. Financial strategy. In water rights cases, calculate both direct usage fees and consequential damages from environmental contamination. Combined liability often forces settlements before opponents can mount defenses. But here's where I made the decision that separated justice from revenge. I wasn't going to financially destroy 800 innocent families just to punish one psychotic woman. "We offer settlement," Rebecca proposed. "Waive all back payments for 3 things. Complete lake restoration, Vivian's resignation plus criminal prosecution, and permanent oversight preventing future abuse." Dr. Mitchell designed the restoration plan right there. 18 months using natural bioremediation, native fish restocking, aquatic plant restoration. Cost, $250,000 paid jointly by HOA funds and Vivian personally. Sarah coordinated media timing, simultaneous story release with legal filing for maximum public pressure. She'd already pitched NPR, Washington Post environmental desk, and 3 cable networks salivating over the HOA Karen Poison's neighborhood water supply angle. The plan was elegant. Hit Vivian with federal charges, state charges, civil liability, and national media exposure simultaneously. Give the innocent homeowners a path forward that didn't bankrupt them. Force accountability without collective punishment. We had evidence that could convict. We had expert testimony that couldn't be challenged. We had media ready to turn Vivian into a national symbol of HOA tyranny, and we had moral high ground that would play beautifully in court and public opinion. Now we just needed the perfect stage for Vivian's very public downfall. You know what's beautiful about watching someone's world crumble? The moment they realize their cover-up is actually making everything worse, but they're too deep to stop digging. Vivian discovered the water contamination exactly the way karma intended, through her neighbors' complaints about the metallic taste in their morning coffee. Within a week of poisoning my lake, the Willow Creek Estates Facebook group exploded with posts about weird-tasting water and strange smell from the taps. Parents complained their kids were getting stomach aches. One woman posted about her dog refusing to drink from its bowl. The comments section turned into a digital panic room. Vivian, being Vivian, immediately went into damage control mode that would make a politician proud. She posted an official HOA statement claiming the taste was natural mineral deposits and seasonal changes in groundwater composition. Translation: nothing to see here, stop asking questions, trust your benevolent dictator. But desperate people do desperate things, and Vivian was about to prove just how far she'd go to hide her environmental terrorism. She contacted the algaecide company Clearwater Solutions and tried to bribe the owner into destroying their service records. Offered him $10,000 cash to lose any documentation of their Midnight Lake treatment. The smell of her desperation could have cleared a room. What Vivian didn't know was that environmental services companies keep meticulous records specifically because of legal liability, and the owner, a guy named Derek Thompson, recorded their entire conversation because something about a frantic woman offering cash bribes at 11 p.m. made his lawyer senses tingle. Legal warning: attempting to destroy evidence or bribe witnesses transforms misdemeanor charges into felony obstruction of justice. The cover-up is often worse than the crime. While Vivian was busy trying to erase evidence, she also hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. Some guy named Rick Patterson who specialized in personal background investigations and looked like he learned his trade from bad TV shows. Rick started following me around town, photographing my truck, talking to my clients, trying to find anything that could discredit me in court. He even attempted to break into my truck one afternoon at the hardware store. I watched from inside the store as he tried the door handles, his cheap suit jacket stretching across his back. I called the police and had him arrested for attempted vehicle burglary. Turns out, Rick had a history of overstepping legal boundaries for clients. His PI license was already on probation. But Vivian wasn't done. She filed anonymous complaints with the state contractor licensing board, claiming my solar panel business was operating without proper permits. Complete fabrication, but it triggered an investigation that cost me 2 weeks and $3,000 in legal fees to resolve. The bureaucratic harassment was back with a vengeance, except this time I was documenting everything. Every phone call, every complaint, every instance of her throwing government agencies at me like weapons. Surveillance tip: in harassment cases, always check your state's recording laws. North Carolina is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record every conversation without informing the other party. Meanwhile, the community health crisis was getting worse. A pediatrician in town noticed a spike in childhood stomach problems among kids from Willow Creek Estates. Parents were bringing children in with symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning, nausea, stomach pain, headaches. The HOA board started receiving dozens of complaints about water quality. People were buying bottled water in bulk. Some families installed expensive filtration systems. The Facebook group became a support group for people convinced something was seriously wrong with their water supply. Vivian's response? Blame aging infrastructure and announce a special assessment of $500 per household for emergency water system upgrades. She was literally charging people to fix the problem she'd created. The board meeting where she announced this was spectacular. 80 angry homeowners packed into the community center, the air thick with tension and the smell of burnt coffee from the ancient community coffee maker. Parents stood up demanding answers, showing medical bills, threatening lawsuits. Vivian stood at the podium in her designer suit, makeup perfect, voice steady, as she lied through her teeth about mineral deposits and infrastructure failures. The woman could have taught masterclasses in gaslighting. 3 board members confronted her after the meeting, demanding to know about the mysterious $3,500 landscaping expense from the HOA budget last month. Vivian refused to provide receipts, claimed it was routine maintenance, and threatened to sue any board member who questioned her financial decisions. That's when board member Patricia Morgan, no relation to Sarah, started doing her own investigation into HOA finances. Turns out, using community funds to poison a neighbor's property counts as embezzlement under North Carolina law. The walls were closing in on Vivian from every direction. Her cover-up was creating new crimes faster than she could hide the old ones, and she still had no idea that I owned the water supply she'd just contaminated. I received one final threatening phone call that week. Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it. The voice was disguised, but the desperation underneath was unmistakable. My response was simple: I'll see you in court. When a cornered animal realizes the trap is closing, it either surrenders or goes absolutely feral. Vivian Blackwater chose feral. Her final gambit started with a neighborhood-wide defamation campaign that would make a propaganda minister jealous. She created 3 fake Facebook accounts, complete with stock photos and fake histories, and flooded the Willow Creek Estates group with posts about my illegal activities. According to Vivian's digital puppets, I was an environmental terrorist who deliberately contaminated my own lake to frame the HOA and extort money from innocent families. The post claimed I was running some kind of insurance fraud scheme, that my solar business was a front for illegal operations, that I had a criminal history. Pure fiction, but posted with enough confidence that people started believing it. Defamation law. Creating fake accounts to spread false statements causing reputational or financial damage constitutes aggravated defamation and can trigger separate civil and criminal charges. The smear campaign worked on some people. I started getting hostile stares at the grocery store. 2 solar installation clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about our business practices. Someone spray-painted LIAR on my truck in the Walmart parking lot. The cheap paint smell lingered for days even after I cleaned it off. But Vivian's desperation was about to lead her into truly stupid territory. She showed up at my house on a Thursday evening, dressed in casual clothes instead of her usual power suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. The sunset cast long shadows across my driveway as she walked up, her heels clicking on the concrete. "Marcus, I think we can resolve this like reasonable adults," she said, setting the briefcase on my porch railing. The leather creaked as she opened it, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills. $100,000 cash to drop all legal action and sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. The evening air smelled like honeysuckle and bribery. What Vivian didn't know was that I was wearing a wire. Tom Martinez had suggested it after her PI got arrested, and I'd gotten very comfortable with the little recording device taped to my chest. North Carolina's one-party consent law is a beautiful thing. You're offering me money to cover up the fact that you poisoned my lake and contaminated your neighborhood's water supply? I asked, making sure the wire caught every word crystal clear. "I'm offering you a reasonable settlement to resolve a property dispute," she said, lawyer speak dripping like venom. "This is a good faith gesture to avoid protracted litigation." "Good faith gesture," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling attempted bribery now?" Her face went from fake friendly to ice cold in about 2 seconds. She snapped the briefcase shut, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the quiet evening. "You're going to regret this, Marcus. I have connections in this county that will destroy you." "I'll take my chances," I said. "Now get off my property before I add trespassing to the list of charges." She left tire marks in my gravel driveway, her Lexus spitting stones as she peeled out. Meanwhile, the environmental health emergency was reaching critical mass. The county health department had received over 50 complaints about subdivision water quality. Parents were documenting their children's symptoms: nausea, stomach pain, persistent headaches, even some cases of skin rashes from bathing in contaminated water. The EPA decided to investigate after a county health officer submitted an official concern report. When federal environmental agencies get involved, things escalate fast. They don't take kindly to contaminated drinking water affecting hundreds of families. EPA investigators arrived at Willow Creek Estates on a Tuesday morning with water testing equipment that made Dr. Mitchell's setup look like a high school science project. They tested wells throughout the subdivision, mapped the aquifer system, and traced contamination sources with the methodical precision of crime scene investigators. Their preliminary findings confirmed what Dr. Mitchell had predicted. Copper sulfate contamination was spreading through the entire underground spring system. Current levels in subdivision wells were approaching EPA emergency thresholds. Within another month, the water would be officially unsafe for human consumption. The EPA issued a public health advisory recommending Willow Creek residents avoid drinking tap water until further notice. Property values started dropping immediately. Nothing kills real estate prices faster than federal warnings about poisoned water supplies. Vivian's psychological breakdown was becoming visible to everyone. She was spotted at the grocery store having a screaming match with herself in the parking lot. Her husband Richard moved out, taking their 2 kids and filing for separation, citing irreconcilable differences and potential legal liability exposure. The HOA board finally voted to remove her as president after discovering she'd used community funds to pay for the algaecide, the PI, and multiple other personal vendetta expenses. Embezzlement charges were filed with the county prosecutor. Her lawyer resigned, citing ethical concerns about representing someone actively committing crimes while under legal scrutiny. Everything Vivian had built, her social standing, her marriage, her position of power, was collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. And she still didn't know the worst part. She'd poisoned a water supply that legally belonged to the man she'd been trying to destroy. The final confrontation was inevitable, and it was going to be very, very public. The Pine Ridge Community Center hadn't seen a crowd like this since the county tried raising property taxes. Standing room only, 300 people crammed into space for 200. The air was thick with body heat, nervous energy, and burnt institutional coffee. TV news crews set up cameras in back. County sheriff positioned deputies near exits. EPA representatives sat front row with official badges and grim expressions. Vivian sat on stage with remaining HOA board members, designer suit perfect, makeup flawless, but her eyes had that cornered animal look. She kept checking her phone, probably praying for a miracle. I sat third row with my team: Rebecca Torres, Dr. Mitchell, Tom Martinez, Sarah Morgan. We had documents that would change everything, but first we'd let Vivian dig deeper. Patricia Morgan, the new board president, called the meeting to order. "We're here to address water quality concerns and discuss EPA findings." The crowd erupted. Parents shouted about sick children. Someone yelled about property values dropping $40,000 in 2 weeks. Demands for refunds, answers, accountability. Patricia raised her hands for quiet. "The EPA will present their findings first." Dr. Sandra Murphy from the EPA didn't sugarcoat it. She displayed water testing results on the projector, bright red numbers showing copper sulfate levels 4 times above safe standards. "Contamination originated from industrial algae-side dumping here," she said, laser pointer highlighting my lake on the aquifer map. "Chemicals entered groundwater and spread throughout the spring, feeding your wells." Vivian squirmed like she was sitting on hot coals. "Who dumped the chemicals?" someone shouted. Dr. Murphy looked directly at Vivian. "That's a matter for ongoing criminal investigation." 300 heads turned to stare at Vivian. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Patricia cleared her throat. "Marcus Reed has information about property rights and water access." I walked to the microphone. Every eye followed. Cameras swiveled. "Most of you know me as the difficult neighbor who wouldn't stop fishing," I started. "Vivian Blackwater spent months trying to drive me off my property through lawsuits, harassment, and eventually environmental terrorism." Vivian shot up. "That's slander. I never—" "Sit down, Mrs. Blackwater," the sheriff's deputy ordered. Not requested. Ordered. I held up my grandfather's 1952 deed. "This document includes one specific paragraph I want to read. All water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity." Silence except for the projector hum. "In plain English, I own the water rights to the entire aquifer feeding this subdivision. Every drop from your taps for 15 years legally belongs to me. The developer never purchased these rights. He just drilled into my water without permission." Confused shouting erupted. Anger, shock, fear mixing in the crowd. I held up my hand. "I'm not here to bankrupt anyone. I'm waiving all back payments, about $30 million you won't owe me." Relief washed over faces. "But Vivian Blackwater poisoned my lake with industrial chemicals, destroying 70 years of family heritage and contaminating water that belongs to me. Then she covered it up while your children got sick." Rebecca stood. "Mrs. Blackwater faces federal environmental destruction charges, state illegal dumping and embezzlement charges, and civil property damage charges. We have video evidence, recorded bribery attempts, and documentation of her using HOA funds for personal vendettas." The deputy walked toward the stage. Vivian went ghost white. "This is a setup! He contaminated his own lake to frame me." "Ma'am, I have an arrest warrant for environmental crimes and obstruction of justice." The room exploded as the deputy handcuffed her. "You'll all regret this," she shrieked. "I'll sue every one of you. That redneck is manipulating you." Final mask, gone, pure rage, and classism on display for 300 witnesses and 3 cameras. As she was escorted out, I returned to the microphone. "I'm proposing a settlement protecting everyone here. Full environmental restoration funded by insurance and Mrs. Blackwater's restitution. No back payments for water usage. And independent oversight to prevent future abuse." The crowd's anger shifted to cautious hope. Patricia stood. The board unanimously supports this proposal. Dr. Mitchell presented the restoration timeline: 18 months to clean water, ecosystem recovery, regular safety testing. Sarah Morgan's article would publish within the hour. HOA president poisons entire neighborhood's water supply in property vendetta. People filed out, some stopping to shake my hand, others processing everything. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability, community healing, and ensuring no one else would suffer under petty tyrants. Vivian Blackwater spent months trying to drive me off my land. Instead, she drove herself straight into a federal prison cell. 6 months after Vivian's arrest, I stood on my dock at sunrise watching native bass fingerlings get released into the lake. Water crystal clear again, that clean mineral smell replacing the chemical stench that had haunted this place. Dr. Mitchell's restoration plan worked better than predicted. Natural bioremediation, strategic water cycling, and native plant restoration brought the lake back to life faster than expected. Monthly EPA tests showed contamination levels dropping to zero. Big Bertha's descendants were thriving. The Grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust became something bigger than I imagined. Settlement funds, $250,000 from Vivian's assets, and HOA insurance created an environmental education program. Local schools bring kids out twice monthly to learn about aquatic ecosystems, water conservation, and protecting natural resources. Turns out poisoning a lake can lead to something beautiful if you're willing to turn tragedy into education. Vivian's legal aftermath was exactly what she deserved. Federal environmental destruction, state illegal dumping, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. She pleaded guilty to everything. 3 years federal prison, 5 years probation, $75,000 in restitution, 200 hours cleaning waterways after release. Her husband divorced her. Real estate law license permanently revoked. She lost everything trying to destroy one man who just wanted to fish in peace. Willow Creek Estates underwent its own transformation. New HOA board implemented transparency policies requiring homeowner vote approval for financial decisions. They established resident rights protection committees and replaced Vivian's dictatorship with actual democratic governance. The twist nobody saw coming? I opened my lake for community fishing. Every Saturday morning, families from the subdivision fish under proper environmental management. Kids who'd never held fishing rods learned to cast from the same dock where my grandfather taught me. The annual spring festival became neighborhood tradition celebrating restored ecosystem, community cooperation, and the idea that sometimes the best revenge is being better than your enemy. This year's festival drew 500 people, proceeds funding local water conservation. Sandra and I still sit on that old dock most evenings, watching bass jump at sunset. The wooden planks feel warm and smooth, worn by time and countless fishermen. Children's laughter from the fishing program mixes with birdsong and gentle splashing. This place feels alive again. Our legal case set precedent. 3 other North Carolina water rights cases cited our settlement as a model for balancing individual property rights with community needs. Environmental law students study how we used leverage for restoration rather than destruction. HOA reform legislation passed the state Senate last month, inspired by Vivian's abuse. New laws require financial transparency, limit HOA authority over pre-existing properties, and establish penalties for harassment and power abuse. One woman's tyranny led to systemic change protecting thousands of future homeowners. My solar business expanded into environmental restoration projects. Fighting an HOA tyrant and winning makes great marketing. I've consulted with dozens of property owners facing similar harassment, helping them understand rights and fight back effectively. Sarah Morgan's article spread nationwide, spawned a podcast series, and inspired proposed federal legislation addressing HOA accountability. One lake, one stand against tyranny, national impact. Here's what I learned. Never let petty tyrants make you abandon principles. Document everything. Know your rights. Sometimes the best way to defeat enemies isn't destruction. It's building something better from their mistakes. Your turn. Have you dealt with HOA nightmares or property rights violations? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else facing similar battles. Real experiences create real change. If this story of standing up to petty tyrants and protecting our environment inspired you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Next week, the city councilman who tried stealing a veteran's land through eminent domain abuse until the veteran discovered the councilman's own property violations. That karma was even sweeter. Remember, Whether you're in North Carolina, Texas, California, or anywhere else dealing with power-hungry HOAs, you're not alone. Communities are stronger than tyrants. Truth is more powerful than corruption. And sometimes one person standing up for what's right changes everything. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and protect what's yours.